Welcome to the very first comment response video. Balloons, fireworks, confetti. Hey everybody, so going forward, we're gonna try something a little bit different. We're gonna separate out comments into their own specific episode. You might have noticed that Mike from Idea Channel has done something similar, but we thought it was a really good idea for Game Show because one of the things that I've noticed is on a week-to-week basis, a lot of you wanna continue a conversation about something that you agreed with or disagreed with in a particular episode, but you wanna be able to do that long past the sort of release date of a particular episode. And you wanna hear what I've said about it and then be able to respond to it and have a dialogue with other people, which is the whole point of Game Show, is to sort of present these big concepts in games, things that you might agree with, things that you think are terrible ideas, and then to be able to discuss them. And you know, right now we don't really have a venue for that to happen. If you want to comment on last week's comment responses, you have to do that in this week's episode. So we think that separating out comment responses will be a great way to foster community and create dialogue about lots of the important things that we talk about on a week-to-week basis. Again, it's an experiment, so you know, if you think it's a good idea, awesome, let me know. If you think it's a terrible idea, awesome, just let me know. We're gonna see how this goes, but I really think it's gonna be a net positive for the show and generally a good experience for everyone. So anyway, let's jump into it. Last week we talked about how No Man's Sky uses mathematical formulas to do the seemingly impossible task of creating a game universe so huge that it contains 18 quintillion unique planets. Let's see what you had to say. Bennemann questions how much plant and animal life No Man's Sky will actually contain. And they link to some comments made by Sean Murray, the game's director, about how if every planet had life on it, the game would feel unrealistic because we know that the universe is mostly barren. Murray goes on to say that only 1 in 10 planets should contain any life at all, and that should be mostly basic life forms. The odds of ultimately crossing paths with complex, sophisticated creatures like dinosaur dogs would be very tiny. Real quick, it's important to remember why we did the episode in the first place. It was less to debate the specificities of, what's gonna happen on each unique No Man's Sky planet because neither you nor I have really spent a lot of time with the game. The episode was really about explaining the systems behind, behind the algorithmic procedural generation that allows for a game like No Man's Sky to exist, and more specifically, allows for a small team to create something so big. Regardless, I'd like to say that, we're both right, because the scope of No Man's Sky is almost unthinkable. There could be an excessive number of species in the game, and even so, you would never come across, it's possible you'd never come across some of the cool ones. It's the same way with how the game world will be populated with players playing on the same server, yet you'll probably never come across anyone because of how large the game actually is. The other thing that I'll say is that this deserted planet thesis goes against every bit of footage that we've been shown of the game. From the very first trailer, there's always been flying alien jellyfish and, strange trees. Even when Murray was playing the game at E3 and chose the planet at random, he managed to hit alien life. So I imagine there would be ways to narrow your search for complex life by some measures. I mean, the reality is it would be like the biggest bait and switch ever if what they show you is these planets teeming with life, and then in reality it's just exploring barren rocks. Many of you voiced your concerns about how Infinity could get boring or repetitive quickly. Infinity, people, all right, never mind. Regardless, Rum Dreg says that they failed to see the appeal of exploration for exploration's sake. To which I would say it's important to remember that exploration was that was what humans did for like tens of thousands of years. They looked at something and then they went to go explore that place. That was what drove humans to do things. So if that's good enough for us, 10,000 years ago as being like a core part of what it means to be a human, I'm sure it's fine for No Man's Sky. Regardless, Lars Lohre says that he doesn't understand the need to replicate a universe with realism to this extent. And he writes that developers should instead concentrate on designing a game that's exciting every step of the way. But I think the hope here is that Hello Games could possibly write formulas that not only create ecosystems and solar systems, but are intricate and amazing, and it could also generate a system of gameplay that's equally versatile and deep. When you think about a game like Minecraft, for example, the designer's hand is there at a very high level, but the hope is that they don't have to basically hold your hand the entire step of the way. That's the promise of games like No Man's Sky. I'm not saying that's what's actually going to happen. Who knows, maybe it'll be really boring. I can't say. However, I do think that, again, if you remember, the point of the episode is to explain the systems that allow for games like No Man's Sky to exist. That's what I'm really excited about. Whether the execution actually comes through, I don't know, we'll see. Even more if you threw doubt on the quality of No Man's Sky's formulas and algorithms for making their world. Webkilla chimes in that a lot of these planets are going to feel generic and boring because of procedural generation, and Flame Rule 13th brings up a fair point, saying a problem with procedural generation is that if you're not random enough, the content will be samey and bore you, but if you go too wild, it'll end up being unrealistic. I'm not sure if, it's unlikely, I don't know, I'm going out on a limb here, unless you all are mathematicians or technical directors and can identify the difference between a boring algorithm and a non-boring algorithm. These complaints sort of sound like issues that you all are creating that may or may not be resolved when No Man's Sky is actually released. So I do think we should give professionals a little bit of credit that they're going to try and walk through some of these problems. But hey, who knows, maybe the game will end up being boring. But I think the important point is that none of us have played the game. None of you all are working on the game unless one of you is secretly trying to sabotage No Man's Sky. So your insights into whether or not there's a random enough algorithm, I mean, look, that's definitely out of my depth, and it's probably out of your depth too. That said, I do understand where it is that you're coming from, because in the past, techniques like this tend to produce games that are just reshuffling the same assets. But not all formulas are created equal. So when you look at the process of cellular automation, which is this process where mathematicians follow rules to fill out squares on rows of grid paper, kind of similar to the L systems I talked about in the episode, the vast majority of them form patterns that are uninteresting and repetitive. But the rare exception will create patterns that go on forever and never repeat themselves. And I think that that's what No Man's Sky is going for. Whether they'll find it is a different matter. And I think the question for you all is like, how long do you need to be impressed for, right? Like if you're asking for No Man's Sky to be infinitely interesting until the end of time, I think you need to ask yourself, like, what is the expectation that you're playing? Why are you playing this game in the first place? But are you saying like, maybe it could be interesting for a couple hours, 10, 20 hours, whatever, I don't know, 5 hours? That seems to me like a doable task, but hey, everybody's different, right? Cawby laments that we didn't talk about the super formula, which is frankly as awesome as it sounds. It was mentioned in that New Yorker article about Hello Games and No Man's Sky. That was actually part of the research that wound up on the cutting room floor. Long story short, a Belgian biologist created a mathematical formula that can create an incredible array of geometrical shapes found in nature, and Hello Games is folding it in amongst the other formulas in the game to generate its land masses and environments. Super cool stuff. One general note about the tenor of the comments that I think is worth mentioning. One of the things I noticed that people were saying were they were setting themselves up essentially to be disappointed by No Man's Sky when it comes out. This is a game that does not exist yet, but you're creating expectations for this thing that's supposed to fill some sort of needs or desires or expectations for this game. So you say, oh, well, the game isn't big enough, or the game's not colorful enough, or whatever it is, based just on the trailers and not having played the game. I think one of the big problems, and I understand where people are coming from because we've grown up as game players, having game marketers basically describe games in these grandiose terms and ending up with a product that is somehow underwhelming. The thing I would encourage you to do, though, is rather than evaluate the promise of No Man's Sky and then compare the final product to whatever it is that you dreamed in your head that it was supposed to be, evaluate it for the thing that it actually is. We need to trust game designers that they're creative people and that there are certain concerns that we don't necessarily know about, and then we hold them accountable. If they create something that's really awesome, awesome. If they create something that's not quite so awesome, that's what our job is as people who consume games. But don't compare the sort of dream world that you've created for No Man's Sky against the final product. No creative person can ever live up to that expectation. It's up to us to help break that cycle, and to sort of laud creators when they do something really amazing, but then hold them accountable when they do something that's not so great. So that's something I would encourage you to do. Not all of you are like this, but I saw it enough in the comments that it merited a mention. One last thing before I go, a big thank you to Alex and May for inviting me to their wedding. Congratulations. I believe it's been about a month or so. I'm sorry that I wasn't able to come, but I'm sure it was amazing. I checked out your registry, but there wasn't anything left to buy. So I guess if you added something else, just let me know and I'll purchase it for you. I will say this is the sweetest thing that any game show fan or commenter has ever done for me. So for the rest of you, bar's been raised. Next step is making me, a godfather or something like that, or maybe giving me your first child or whatever. I'm open to this. I will do this for you all because I love you all so much. So anyway, thank you, Alex and May, and congratulations, and I hope you have a bright future.